The day the HOA tried to tow my houseboat, they didn't know I was the mayor. It was a crisp Colorado morning when Margaret Walsh rolled up to my dock with a tow truck the size of a small house. She stood there, clipboard in hand, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, declaring my houseboat me home for years an eyesore that violated every rule in her precious HOA handbook. No warning, no discussion, just her barking orders like she owned the lake. Then, to top it off, she called the cops on me for interfering with her so-called official operation. Right there on my own dock. I'm not kidding. Her name was Margaret Walsh, and in our little town of Lakeview, that name sent neighbors scurrying faster than a summer storm. But let me tell you, her plan went south in a way she never saw coming. Ever had an HOA tyrant try to steamroll you? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear about the ones who went too far and tripped over their own rules. Let me set the scene. Margaret wasn't just any HOA president. At 38, she was a force of nature, with her blonde hair tied back in a tight bun that screamed, I mean business. She didn't just enforce rules, she lived for them. Her binders were color-coded, her emails were bullet-pointed, and she could spot a misplaced lawn ornament from a mile away. What made her dangerous wasn't her obsession with control, it was her brains. As she stood on my dock, flipping through her stack of papers, I knew I was up against someone who'd spent months building a case against me. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just some guy living on a boat. My name's Tom Bennett, and for the past 5 years, I've been the mayor of Lakeview. Quietly. I keep a low profile, live simply, and avoid the spotlight. Before that, I spent decades as a county planner, writing the very regulations Margaret was trying to throw in my face. But sometimes, the best way to handle a bully is to let them dig their own grave. So, I stayed quiet, curious to see how far she'd go. You can hire a lawyer if you want, Margaret sneered, handing me a violation notice so detailed it could have been a legal textbook. But I doubt a boat dweller can afford a losing fight. The way she spat out boat made it sound like I was squatting in a dumpster. My houseboat, by the way, is a restored 1960s beauty, decked out with solar panels and sustainable materials I spent years perfecting. Her notice was a masterpiece: photos, timestamps, even a diagram of my boat's position relative to the shore. The tow truck driver, a grizzled guy named Carl, looked uneasy. Ma'am, I'm not comfortable hooking up to someone's home without city paperwork, he said, scratching his head. Margaret thrust another stack of documents at him, claiming emergency authorization. Carl glanced at me, clearly hoping I'd stop this madness. I didn't. I wanted to see how deep Margaret's delusion ran. 48 hours, she declared, turning on her heel. Find somewhere else to live, or I'm back with an enforcement order. As her sedan peeled out, leaving only the scent of her perfume, I couldn't help but grin. Here was a woman so sure of her power she was ready to evict the mayor from his own town. This was going to be interesting. The next morning, Margaret was back, leading a posse of neighbors along the shore like a general rallying troops. From my kitchen window, I watched her point at my boat, her clipboard thicker than a phone book. She'd swapped her suit for tactical outdoor gear, like she was on a mission to conquer the wilderness. Her group 6 or so lakefront homeowners looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. But Margaret had a plan, and it was impressive. She'd spent the night digging up every obscure regulation she could find: HOA bylaws, environmental codes, even maritime safety rules. She'd turned her vendetta into a full-blown campaign, complete with witnesses and a timeline of my supposed crimes. By 9 a.m., my phone was ringing off the hook. Tom, we've got a problem, said Lisa, a city planner I've known for years. This woman buried us in paperwork: 37 pages of complaints, photos, even an environmental impact study. We don't know where to start. Margaret had overwhelmed the planning department in less than a day. By noon, she was knocking on doors, petition in hand, convincing neighbors my boat was tanking their property values. Some signed to get rid of her. Others argued like it was a town hall. Her persuasion was almost supernatural. Then came the inspector. A guy in a cheap vest showed up, claiming to check for zoning violations. His credentials screamed private contractor. Margaret had hired her own enforcer. I let him poke around, taking photos that duplicated her work, because I was curious how far this charade would go. By evening, the city attorney called. Tom, what's with this houseboat? This woman's threatening to sue the city over 12 code violations. She's citing rules I didn't even know existed. I told him I'd handle it, but I wasn't ready to tip my hand just yet. At 4 a.m. the next day, I caught Margaret on her balcony, binoculars glued to her face, scribbling notes like she was tracking a fugitive. She logged every move I made: coffee, lights, you name it. By 7 a.m., she was calling the city with new emergencies. My solar panels were a traffic hazard. My coffee making was too loud. It was unhinged, but it wasn't about me anymore. Margaret was unraveling, her need for control spiraling into obsession. Around noon, an older neighbor, Clara, stopped by, looking exhausted. "She's done this before, Tom," she whispered. "Different lake, same fight. She's been watching you for weeks: charts, logs, even when you brush your teeth. She thinks proving you're chaotic makes the lake safer." Clara glanced up at her sister's house, where Margaret lived. It clicked. This wasn't about rules. Margaret was battling something deeper, and my boat was her scapegoat. When Margaret started intercepting delivery vans, flashing fake notices to scare drivers away, I knew she'd crossed into harassment. She even tried to block my newspaper guy. Then she called the cops again, claiming I was suspicious for reading on my deck too long. The officer, a friend named Mike, rolled his eyes. "Tom, she's killing me with these calls. What's her deal?" I just shrugged. The stage was set for her final act. That night, Margaret turned the community center into a war room. Folding chairs, bad coffee, and a projector displaying my boat like it was a crime scene. She'd invited half the town, framing it as an emergency safety meeting. Her slides were FBI-level pins, arrows, red text screaming community crisis. Clara sat in the back, watching her sister like a parent at a troubled kid's recital. Margaret's speech was polished, painting my boat as a threat to everything Lakeview stood for. But the crowd wasn't sold. "Last I checked, the HOA doesn't own the lake," one guy snapped. Margaret deflected, citing citizen responsibility when laws fail. The room grew tense. She called for a vote to demand I remove my boat. It was close, 13-12 in her favor. She took it like she'd won an election, announcing direct action within 48 hours. I slipped out, knowing her victory was about to crumble. Friday morning, chaos erupted. A massive tow truck roared onto the shore, flanked by 2 news vans and a crowd of onlookers. Margaret, in a Navy suit, stood center stage, delivering a speech for the cameras about restoring order. The tow truck driver hooked up to my boat as reporters ate it up. She turned a neighbor dispute into a media circus, framing herself as a hero against a lawless boat dweller. I'd seen enough. Dressed in my best suit, I stepped onto the dock, briefcase in hand. The crowd hushed as I pulled out my mayor's badge, letting it catch the sunlight. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady, "there's been a misunderstanding about who has authority here. I'm Tom Bennett, mayor of Lakeview for the past 5 years. These regulations? They're under my jurisdiction." Margaret froze, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, and panic. The cameras swiveled to her as the crowd gasped. "You're lying," she stammered, but her voice cracked. Phones came out, neighbors Googling my name. The truth hit her like a freight train. Her campaign weeks of spying, fake documents, public stunts had targeted the one person who could shut it down with a word. Clara pushed through, wrapping an arm around her sister as Margaret's composure shattered. "There have to be rules," she screamed, her voice raw. It wasn't about my boat, it was about her desperate need for control in a world that felt chaotic. Clara's voice was soft but firm. "Margaret, this isn't about the boat. It's about you. You're not sleeping, not eating. We're going to get you help." The crowd dispersed, the news crews packed up, and I felt a pang of guilt. I'd let this play out to teach Margaret a lesson, but I hadn't seen how deep her pain ran. "Why didn't you stop me?" she whispered, tears streaming. "Why let me humiliate myself?" I sighed. Sometimes, we need to see our mistakes clearly to change. This wasn't about the boat, Margaret. It was about you finding peace. 6 months later, Lakeview was transformed. Margaret, with therapy and Clara's support, channeled her energy into something remarkable. She volunteered for our new environmental program, turning my houseboat into a floating classroom for sustainable living tours. Her obsessive research skills, once used to harass, now created top-notch educational materials. She organized community barbecues with military precision, and kids who once feared her now begged for her treasure haunts. The local paper called her from crusader to conservationist, and she laughed every time she heard it. One evening, as kids played on the lake, Margaret approached me. "Tom, I owe you more than an apology. I was so busy controlling everything. I missed what really mattered: people, not rules." Her words carried hard-earned wisdom. We'd both learned something. Me about the cost of staying silent, her about the power of letting go. My houseboat became a local gem, featured in magazines as a model of eco-friendly living. A banner hung from the deck. Welcome to Lakeview's floating classroom. Margaret's tours were booked solid, her knowledge and story of redemption drawing crowds. Clara, beaming with pride, told me, I never thought I'd see her this happy. She's finally found her place. As I watched the sunset over the lake, I realized Lakeview had become more than a town. It was a community that turned conflict into connection. Margaret wasn't my enemy. She just needed a role that fit her better. And me? I learned that leadership isn't just about authority, it's about giving people a chance to grow. What do you think? Was I wrong to let Margaret's campaign spiral? Or was it the only way for her to change? Share your thoughts in the comments, especially about dealing with injustice or aggression in your own life. Have you faced someone like Margaret? Did you confront them or give them space to learn? Let's hear your take. Your story might spark the next big conversation.